Hi and welcome to LBB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. I am going to play for you an interview that I recorded during my stay in New Jersey and New York last year, 2012. But before I play the interview, just a comment. During the interview, I mentioned disabled lifestyle. If you know about it, I have a YouTube channel where I have videos of myself in New York and New Jersey showing that you can have low vision and be legally blind in my case and have a great time and be happy regardless of your disability. So, as I mentioned disabled lifestyle in the interview I did in New York City, is because in the future I may do some podcasts about other disabilities besides low vision and blindness, besides being visually impaired. And so that's why you hear the disabled lifestyle comment during the interview. We'll see what happens in the future. For now, I'm continue doing only shows about low vision and blindness. This interview with someone who is blind and he's also a friend of mine, and I hope you find this interview very useful. And remember, if you want to be on the show, on LVB Show, you can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. And now the interview. Hi, I am Alvaro. You are listening to Disabled Lifestyle Show. I am in New York City. I know it's exciting. I know you're excited for me. I'm very excited for myself as well. Tonight, thanks to my good friend Ed, I'm interviewing Mark Ramnauth. He is an entrepreneur. He lives in New York City. He's blind and he has a lot to tell us. First of all, thank you so much, Mark, for being with us.
Oh, thank you, and I'd like to welcome you to New York City. I think it's a wonderful thing that you have this podcast and that you're reaching out to people all over the world. And if I could say something that would help one person, I would be very pleased, and I'm honored that you even want to talk to me.
All the pleasure is mine. My first question to you would be, how is like to be blind in New York City as a business person?
Well, it sucks.
Tell me something I don't know.
No, I'm kind of joking because I take pleasure in living it. If I would say, as a person who is blind or vision impaired, if there's any place in the world I'd rather be, it would be New York. There are a lot of wonderful cities around the world, and I love to travel. But the reason why I love New York City so much is that it has an amazing mass public transportation system. I have access to almost every type of culture, business, and entertainment events easily accessible to me. So the fact that I live and work in New York allows me to get around easily. Now, there are many challenges, so I don't want to sound like everything is rosy-dozy, you know?
Right, like everything. Okay, now, what is your visual impairment? Why are you blind?
Well, when I was about 5 years old, my grandfather discovered that I couldn't see some of the things that the other kids could, and then eventually they figured out that I have some form of juvenile macular degeneration. Today, it's in the family of Stargardt's disease, but it's confusing why they think it could be Conrad or rod cone dystrophy. In any event, the way that vision impairment affects me is that it causes me not to have good central vision. So I can't see pretty girls' faces until I kiss them, like have to be that close. And I can't read easily any kind of print without it being magnified and large or, on audio. And but I have decent mobility, which lately has become a little more difficult. But those have been my challenges with how this vision affects me. I used to have better vision as a child because at one time I could read large print, and when I put it up close. But as time goes on, I have not been able to do it, and I've had to use a lot of accessible technology.
Okay, for our listeners, I was lucky enough to walk around New York City at night with him, and he's not using a cane at this moment. I am using Mr. Magoo, as everybody knows. But Mark, tell us, how is it like not to have a cane and walk at night in New York City?
Well, one of the things that is very important when people talk about blind and vision impairment, we sometimes put everybody into a big category.
Right.
It's very important that people who don't know much about diagnosis understand that some severe vision impairment that makes you legally blind does not take away your mobility. What that means is that I can't read the signs and I can't read what's around me, but I can tell where the streets are and I can have a good general periphery. But I can't see the faces. I couldn't read a number plate on a car, but I can see it's coming. Even if something looks like a shadow, I know it's there. So what happens is that I'm able to see that. What's become more difficult is like the difference between the end of the sidewalk and the beginning of the road, so I can stumble a little bit here and there. So that's what's the challenge. Now, somebody who has my friend Ed that you talked about earlier and other friends who have RP, I can walk with them around without their cane and lead them okay. But when we go to a restaurant, they read the menu. I can't read the menu. I can't see the menu. So that's because my peripheral vision is good, but my central vision is bad. And in RP, for example,
right.
People who have RP, it's really the opposite. And they have sometimes very good, center vision and their periphery. So in my case, and most people have Stargardt's disease or macular degeneration, some of these conditions, we have better mobility. And as time goes on, it becomes more difficult, depending on which photoreceptor cells gets degenerated. Just not to get too technical, but that's what's going on with me. I hope that helps.
That helps a lot, Mark. Now, you have a beautiful story like the American Dream story, because you actually weren't born in the United States. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I came to the United States in 1985 from my native Guyana, which is in South America. Many people don't know that Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America. And it's sort of part of the Caribbean because of that history. But I was born, and I was lucky enough to grow up without any assistive technology, and I was lucky enough to be born into a family with very little means. I was lucky enough to be in a country where they had very little services for people with blind and vision impairment, and I was lucky enough where people didn't expect you to do much when you have a vision impairment. Right. I visited the Blind Institute in Guyana, for example, and there was a bunch of blind guys. Some of them learned how to weave baskets, play dominoes, talk loud, and drink a lot of rum. And that's what they did for their life. And I'm saying lucky for a specific reason. The reason I'm saying lucky is because I was happy. Sometimes with all the choices, you start getting like a little confused. But I'm being a little facetious, because when I came to the United States in 1985, everything changed. Before that, I was very happy that I could do little things. So I set very modest goals for myself. So right now I feel like I had surpassed all of my goals, because I figured, okay, I wasn't going to be the best cricket player, which is the kind of ball we play in Guyana, and I couldn't be good at academics because I couldn't read, and all this kinds of stuff was not easy to do. People helped me here and there, but I started playing a little music. I got good at chess, decent at chess, and I figured things that I could do. But that meant sort of going back into yourself, being alone, doing things like that. But I set modest goals. So I was thrilled when I was able to get a job working in a factory. I worked in a factory polishing pills when they came out of the machine and things like that, So I was like, wow, I can do this, So those kinds of modest goals, I said. But when I came to the United States, I was very fortunate to go live in the middle of boondocks, Pennsylvania, in the coal mining country, in a place called Crescent in Barnesboro. I went to a little college there run by the Sisters of Mercy. And over there, they said to me, basically, you want to study, we'll give you all kinds of help. So I got many technological help. I got 4-track tape recorders back then. I got computer assistive technology after we had gone to all the doctors and they couldn't do this. At that time, there was no such thing as Zoom text yet. There was this thing called LP-DOS back in the day. And that was allowing me to access like the Windows program. And I didn't know anything about even Windows back then because actually it was DOS.
Right.
And then I started learning how to use the computer. They provided me with readers. And they said, as long as you want to take the exam, we'll give you even a little bit of time. So a combination of the technology, a combination of people willing to help you, and your own motivation. Right. Those are the 3 things that I like to talk about a lot because I believe they're very important for any kind of effective lifestyle for people who are vision impaired,
Right. Now, I'm very interested, and I know our listeners are too, in the way people with disabilities and people in the visually impaired community try to start a business right now because many people don't find employment. Just it's so hard to find it, even in the U.S. So what would be your first advice for a blind guy or any degree of low vision who says, you know what, instead of trying to find a job, I want to build my own business? Right. What would be your advice for them to feel that they can really do this?
Well, I can speak for a long time on this subject, but I'll try to keep it down to a nutshell. I think number 1 is that not everybody seems to be cut out for business. But I also believe that if you really set your mind to it, that you could probably develop a business that would work. We have to think long before jobs were invented, most human beings were business people. Back in the early days of history, when people grew crops and they sold it and they traded, they didn't go to work and have a job. It's a modern mindset to think that somebody has to create a job for you. So whenever you needed to eat and you grow something and you grow a chicken and you sell it to your neighbor and you did that, you have to realize that this whole idea of business is not, it's more, seems like strange because modern world has these things called jobs and we put job description in it.
Right.
So that's number 1 I wanted to say first. The other thing is though that if you are going to do business, you have to do certain things. You cannot expect certain principles, and as I think mentioned to you before, there are I think regardless of whatever idea you put in the business, you need to come up with a business plan. And for starters, I like to deal with the 5 components that I think are basic components to every enterprise. So if you're going to sell lemonade or you're going to develop a business that's providing legal services or something more complicated like I do, these 5 basic elements must be present in almost any enterprise. Whether you realize it or not, it has to be there. So the reason why I think that's important is if you only focus on one element, you'll end up having challenges that will surprise you, and then you'll have to start over, or you might miss some basic things, and you will decrease your chance of success. So if you want, I can briefly
please mention those. Yes.
Okay, those 5 things. You can go into details, but in a shortened form. Everybody who's in business must be selling something, a product or a service. So that's number 1. So whatever it is you got, that's the easy part because everybody I know has a business idea. Everybody got some great idea they want to sell. But even if you just take my simple example of a lemonade stand, just to keep it simple, the guy wants to sell lemonade, the girl wants to sell lemonade. That's his or her product, correct? Number 2, you have to have customers.
Right.
No business can work without somebody who's going to buy it. That sounds obvious. Yeah. But the reason why I say it is because a lot of people have ideas, but they haven't thought about who's the customers and is anybody going to buy my lemonade? Okay?
True.
So I got to have it. And in order to reach my customers, the people have to know that I have something that they need. That is the simplest definition of marketing. whenever you provide something that people need or want, you have to let them know you have it. So you have to put marketing to reach your customers.
Right.
So that's why I put the marketing on the customer. So really, I think the most important part of a business is number 2, the customers. Because once you have customers, you could tailor your product, you can do all the other elements of the basic business plan.
Right.
You got customers, you got business. Okay? You just have to learn how to do the rest of the stuff.
Right.
Okay. Number 3 is finance. So if you have a lemonade stand, you can't start it with nothing. You have to pay for the lemon.
Yes.
You have to pay for the water. See, whatever the enterprise is, a little bit of money is needed to start with.
Yeah.
But finance is more than that. You can borrow it, you can do whatever you do. There's a lot of things, but you need to think it through.
Yes.
But you also know how to count it, which is the bookkeeping and accounting. So you need to set up a financial plan, some kind of a way how you're going to count your lemonade money, and you have to know when you're making a profit or when you're making a loss. So that's the financial part of it. Okay? The fourth part is what I like to call operations. Operations mean how does everything work, and a lot of business fail in this place on the operations. Why? Is because they have not thought through the details. A little kid with a lemonade stand could have the best lemonade, he could have customers, but he doesn't know that he need a permit to put his table out on the front. He doesn't know the size of the table. He doesn't have a place to store the table.
Those specifics,
the specific logistics. He could show up with a lemonade, and then he finds out that somebody took his spot and he can't sell the lemonade. The operations have to be thought through. You have a business like I do, which is an office. You have to have computers at work, phones at work, fax machines at work, telephones at work, backup systems in the cloud, and a whole bunch of stuff that people don't even think about. And if you don't have that, your customers can't reach you. You lose them, etc. So the operations are very, very critical. And the fifth point is what I like to call human resources. Basically, we know what that means. So the guy who's selling lemonade is you, right? But as soon as you have a business that requires more than 1 or 2 people, or things that have to be done, if let's say you start a little business and you're the lemonade guy, but you need somebody to carry the table because you're in a wheelchair or you're blind or something, you need somebody else to do something else, you have to think, who is that person? So who's doing it is the HR. So those are my 5 basic startup things. There's a lot else to a business, so I don't want to make it simplified. But if you don't think of these 5 basic elements, you have nothing. So.
Now, Mark, tell us about your business experience. How has been developing? What are your projects, for instance, as well?
Well, I have 2 businesses currently. What happened is that I have 20 plus years in the field of vocational rehabilitation. And basically, I have a master's degree that allows me to provide services to help people with disabilities figure out how to find employment and to work. And so I've done that in the public and private sectors for many years in various types of agencies. Some agencies that serve people with low academic achievement, developmentally disabled, to people with multiple physical disabilities. And I have done those things in the field of helping people return to work. And I have a simple definition for people with disabilities in general. To go to work, you have to try another way. If you have a disability, it stops you. You need to think outside the box and think that this function has to be done in a different way. So that's what led to me eventually starting to do the businesses that I do today. The 2 main businesses that I have now, one is that we help people in a small law office that I have. We provide legal services, and we have a lawyer who works with us. And what we do is when people have lost their cases and they're trying to win disability, we advocate for them and help them to get their Social Security disability benefits. And that company is called Secura. You can look it up at secura-inc.com. And we help those people win their benefits, secure the benefits. It's a very complex business. It involves vocational, medical, and legal questions have to be addressed to get it done. And I was fortunate to learn that because the judges who adjudicate these cases hired me for several years, and I learned from them, and then I got certified and started my own practice.
Oh, wow.
And then the second part of the business that I have is I am an expert in personal injury lawsuits. Because of my background in vocational rehabilitation, when people get injured from a disability, there is a specialty whereby you can measure how much money they're losing, and the courts and the lawyers are interested in you testifying. So they pay me to go to court and testify, write reports on this. So under my business, which is called Apex Rehab Management, I do very little clinical work as I used to, because I'm getting a little older now. But most of the work I do under my Apex Rehab Management business is really having to do now with doing vocational consulting and expert testimony. There's a lot of components to that, but I don't want to bore you and your listeners.
Right. Very interesting, Mark. My question now, listening to you, would be, what is the worst problem facing the disabled right now in this planet, in your opinion?
Boy, I don't know. To be honest with you, I think I'm too small a guy to answer a big question like that. But I can give you a couple of thoughts.
Yes.
Okay? What's the most? I don't know. What's some of the problems? I think the first problem is personal attitude. I think the way our attitude to life, whether we're disabled, non-disabled, or whoever we are, the remarkable thing about human beings is that we have the capacity to change the way we live today. You don't find fishes and donkeys and stuff sitting there saying, I don't like my life now, I'm going to go to school and change it. Human beings have the remarkable capacity to improve their life with their efforts and stuff like that. Now, on your own, you can't do it. Sometimes you could do it to a certain degree. But on my own, if I did everything I did in Guyana without help, I would be probably the same place in the factory. So I believe that it's nice when society create access. So like, for example, for blind people, the way today the world has a lot of access in terms of trying to help us get to the computers, get around. They have laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act. I was happy to hear Guyana just pass something like that so that we can open doors, etc. So there's a component of me, there's a component of the society, the government, the institutions, and then there's assistive technology. Learning how to use assistive technology. Those three things are critical for us to overcome. And they're all work together, I think.
Now, you seem very independent, so my question for you is, there is this movement or this line of thought of independent living, people in the blind community who say we need to be independent all the time, and we need to learn to do that, because if not, life is not going to be good. Are you in the middle? Are you for independent living? Do you think things sometimes are not so white and black or something like that?
Yeah. Well, you've touched on a subject that I like to reflect on. I believe in independence as much as we can do it. I believe it's highly rooted to understanding what human beings are like, philosophically. Human beings are essentially only independent in very few parts of their life. We think we are. What happens with people vision impaired is we compare ourselves with people who are non-vision impaired.
Right.
So that's the problem. We said, we need to be independent in driving, for example. We can't drive, most of us, right? So we feel like that's like only the thing to do. But if you look deeper at the concept of independence we are interdependent more than we're dependent in the world. I don't bake the bread that I eat every day because a guy down the street bakes it. I don't clean the streets. I don't do all of those things. I do some of it. The habit that's really important and the attitude that's really important to understand independence, in my mind, is knowing what's in your control and what's not in your control. And that really comes to understanding life in itself. We're going to die one day, you know what I mean?
Right.
Basically, when it comes to independence, I like to talk about autonomy versus independence. that in the areas where we could be independent, if the accessible technology could help me find my way around, if the cane could help me get from here to there, and I can get around, if I can brush, do all my own independent personal needs for myself, pick my clothes by using technology, sure, fantastic. I need to know what within my autonomy to do. But we sometimes take it too far when we think that because somebody is trying to help me to do something, that I'm giving up my independence. Today I was in the elevator, there were 5 people. I could feel my way around the elevator till I find a button, or I could just say to somebody, can you press 17 for me?
Right.
I asked the guy to press, he said, absolutely. And then told me when I get to my floor, no, this is not the floor, the next one. So I could have tried to do it independently. What's wrong with me asking this guy? Part of that is humility. I think we have to be humble to understand that we have limits. And fully sighted people have the same issue. The really important thing for me, though, is autonomy. So therefore, if somebody tries to help you, they should give you the opportunity to say yes or no. Right? So that's what I mean by autonomy. Autonomy is more important than independence. So you want to help me, you say, can I help you? And we should be, as people with vision impairment, more gracious. And if we don't need the help, don't yell at them and say, what do you think, I'm blind, I can't help myself, Too many of us have that attitude. And we need to graciously say, no thank you, I can manage on my own, or I really appreciate you offering you, and sure, I would love you to help me to cross the street. But what's the big thing there? The person asks me if I need help. So the public needs to learn how to deal with us too. But they're not going to help us if half of the blind community yells at them soon as they talk. They say, oh, those angry blind people, they don't like you to help them.
Right.
You see my point?
Oh,
and
yes.
That's my thing about independence.
Oh, yes, Mark. Actually, in one of the shows I did, I was talking about an experience here in New York City at Penn Station, where a train driver was going with me through the street, and he told me, you are not mad at life? I said, no, should I? And he said, no, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that many blind people in New York are just so angry. And I said, well, I'm not, I love life, I love people, and I love the way I am, and so that's, we're in the same boat. That's what I was trying to say. Now, time I know is running out. I have 2 questions. The first one is, how would you recommend, or in other words, what kind of products would you recommend for blind people to buy in order to make their lives easier, like an iPhone or whatever it is?
I'm going to be a cop-out on this question. By that I mean, I'm not going to really give you an answer, but I'll give you a principle. Because you can listen to 1,000 podcasts and go online and find all kinds of assistive technology.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
For me, the smartphones are probably the best thing these days because it's complicated, but it provides a lot of more function. You can get rid of your radio, your alarm clock, and all that kind of stuff by getting a smartphone. But that's just one piece of technology.
Right.
It's important when people think about assistive technology and devices that they think about what they need it for. I know hundreds of blind and visually impaired people with wasted technology around their house that they don't use.
Good point.
And the other thing is that they have the devices hanging around and they never get to use it, or it's too much information to manage, to plug in, to pull out, to put, to carry, everything else. You have to think more from function, because life today is very overloaded with information. So if you get a smartphone or a computer that's accessible and you're using that, it's critical that you sometimes think, what do I need this computer for? I want to do email, I want to do Word documents, I want to do XYZ. Because the computer is an unlimited tool, and you could spend unlimited time on it, and you have limited time in life. So my point is, think about what you want to do, because to be effective, you have to have time management in life. And that's the problem sometimes with technology. And I know a lot of people could spend time. There's a lot of experts on the internet who can tell you about assistive technology. I could tell you about some that I know about, but I feel like what I'm saying now is more important for people to understand.
I think it is, Mark. I think it is. Now, I'm a romantic, so let's talk about women.
Okay.
How is relationships for blind people these days? Do you, for example, you feel that dating someone who has a disability for you is easier? Any recommendations to those singles outside?
Well, it's a tough subject, but I think it's an important need that's overlooked a lot of times. I am not an expert on relationship. I've screwed up a bunch of them in my own life. I was married and divorced, and I have a great son who's 10. But I maintain a good relationship with my ex, and I also have met lots and lots of women. And when I was a kid, I was particularly shy, and at many parties, I have asked a man for a dance because they had long hair, and I thought it was a woman. And socially, it's very uncomfortable. But I rather be uncomfortable than lonely.
Oh, yeah.
And I decided to take chances. I think the first thing you have to do, my advice to people with blind and visually impaired, do not stay home. It's too easy to stay home.
Yes.
It's too easy to learn how to play music because you can do that by yourself. It's good. And you can develop great talents that you can go outside and show, but use it to go out and express yourself in the world, because relationships are out in the world. You can live a life without a relationship, you wouldn't die, but is that how you want to live? So for me, what worked is that I always loved dancing. And that has been such a blessing for me because I have an extensive group of friends. Met a lot of beautiful, wonderful women here in New York because I developed many skills in ballroom dancing and other dances. Depending on your visual impairment, dancing is not always the best hobby because dancing is usually going around the floor. But there are several dances that are done on the spot. And the Latin dances, for example, is something I recommend. And there's no reason why people with blindness and visual impairment don't dance or sing. But one of the things that visual impaired people are very good at is music. And they should have karaoke party every week and go out and do that kinds of stuff. I say find social involvement. There's a lot of sports now for people with blind and visual impairment. If that's what you like to do, get out of the house. That's the bottom line. And mobility is hard for visual impaired people, so I don't want to make it sound easy, but find one route that you know, one bus ride that you can do. If you live in New York, maybe get an Accessor ride or get a buddy who drives or something, but whatever you have to do, just get out of the house.
Now, are you open to meet people, women without disabilities, or you are thinking, maybe not so much?
I am open in general, but at this stage in my life, I'm over 50. I've kind of like not really looking, because I meet a lot of people. So for me, I can't say that I'm not open, but I'm open to all kinds of people. I dated someone in a wheelchair for a brief time when I was in college, and I used to bring her to parties and everything else, and she was paraplegic. And I used to have to lift her from the wheelchair to get her into the certain restaurants, because back then. So, and we had a short-term relationship while we were in college, but I am not opposed to dating people with disabilities. For me, I look for more than a physical attraction with a mental connection. But that's just me. When it comes to relationship, everybody has different needs.
You're right about that. You're right about that. Now, my last question would be, what is your advice to parents of people with blindness and visual impairment who are thinking, oh my God, my children is never going to be able to see the world. How can that person be successful? What would you say to them? Many parents listen to this show.
Yeah, well, it's a hard thing for parents, and I understand that, and there's not enough done for parents but they need to understand and look at the lives of all the successful and happy blind people in the world and hope that their child has a vision for what their life is just like everybody else. They need to embrace that reality, unfortunately, but it's a reality, of their disability and not pretend it's not there, and just do not compare yourself with sighted people. I have a blind child, a child with a visual impairment. I cannot compare him to kids who have full sight. But comparison is not the important thing. What a child does with their future is a big, wide open world, and they can choose what they can do within reason, but they don't have to limit themselves. The thing that happened to me as a child is, one, my parents had no clue what to do. They didn't have facilities, so for them it's like whatever. They kind of ignored it and just didn't deal with it.
Right.
That is the worst thing you can do. So by doing that, you might be sending a message to your child that they cannot accomplish a lot or contribute a lot.
Right.
Actually, I like the word contribute more, because for me, the purpose of my life, and we could talk another day about some of the values that I've developed that I think came out of my vision impairment.
Right.
But the purpose of my life is, if when I get out of here, I'm sure I'm not going to make it to 100, that I make a little difference. That somewhere along the line that I have made a difference. And fortunately, at age 50, I have done that 100-fold times, so I can say I've lived a very happy, successful life. I've also had a lot of pleasure, and I've had what I consider to be success, because success is based on whatever you define it to be. Now it's somebody else define it to be. So you can define your success. So for me, I've had a very happy, fulfilled, successful life so far, and it's not over yet. So if you measure that way, but don't limit your children. And also by exposing them to technologies and ideas and successful people with visual impairment, they will see that the possibilities are endless.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think Mark is a good example for the disability community, okay? Now, how do we keep in touch with Mark, is what people are saying right now. So,
well, if people want to email me, my email is guyanamr@gmail.com. And, my the website I mentioned earlier is just my work site, but there's an email there to it. If people have, the Social Security website or the other website. So that's pretty much it. People want to email me, no problem.
Okay, so listeners, thank you for listening. To Mark, thank you so much. We are at his office in New York City. He has become a good friend of mine. It's a pleasure to interview him. He has so much heart. I always go for the heart, I think that's what we need in life, With that, you have it all, because you can start doing and changing things for our society that we need so much.
Thank you, Alvaro.
It's my pleasure, Mark. And for our listeners, if you have any questions, you want to be on the show, you just email me at disabledlifestyle@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening from New York City. Good night.